All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we're going to talk about the Super Bowl MVP market, talk about some next team odds for coaches on the market, Belichick and Harbaugh primarily, and then we'll talk about the NBA Coach of the Year market, which is, to be honest, I think every NBA awards market is a little off at the moment. This one is a little bit closer to on, but we'll get into that and what we think about it. But let's start, Drew, with Super Bowl MVP. Lamar Jackson is perhaps unsurprisingly the favorite at plus 250, followed by Brock Purdy plus 325. Patrick Mahomes plus 350, almost a carbon copy of Kansas City's Super Bowl price. And then you have McCaffrey, Goff, and they're your only guys under 50 to 1. And then you have Ayuk, Kelsey, and company. What do you make of this market?
Well, it'd be a lot easier to handicap this if I knew who was going to win Super Bowl, Jay. Don't know who's going to win, which makes this interesting. I guess, the market would tell you we should probably just be angling for 49ers here because they are so much more likely to be represented in the Super Bowl than any of these players from the AFC. I know that we're currently looking at a number like 3.5. I guess really 3.25 for the Ravens right now, the way that market has sort of found its footing. But I still see that as a pretty coin flippy type of game, particularly with Pat Mahomes involved as the dog. So, realistically, I'm steering clear of both Chiefs and Ravens because, again, like this is it's anyone's guess who gets there. And as you mentioned, there's no juice to squeeze out of the Mahomes relative to the KC price. So that one's an easy pass. Now, the Niners being likely to get there is interesting to me because certainly we talked about this maybe at the very onset of the playoffs, and I thought you made a very valuable point at the time when, oh, by the way, Brock Purdy was like plus 450, your point was he should be more like 75-80% of the equity for the Niners if they win the Super Bowl because he is the quarterback, and I agree with that. I will say though that his performance last week was it was like a little bit of a cold water dousing. Not that I doubt he can do it, but just that if he does, are people going to use this recency against him? And I'm perfectly fine suspending disbelief that he will be held accountable for a poor performance against Green Bay if ultimately they beat the Lions, move on to the Super Bowl, and then win the Super Bowl. It's going to be because Purdy played well enough to do that. And so I think that's probably the only realistic bet to have in this market. CMC is too dependent on touchdowns, and in general, if you're in a game against the Ravens, all of a sudden CSC looks like a poison price. It's just considering the way that they play defense. The idea that the Niners are gonna, if they win that game, are gonna have to do so through the air, largely targeting the boundaries, kind of takes CMC a little bit out of that game plan. So ultimately I think it's Purdy or pass. And if you want to get weird and play some defensive players or some wide receivers, literally none of these prices to me look valuable enough to kind of try to be creative, try to be an outsider in this market right now. So I think this is an interesting one to try to think through. How would you match up teams in the Super Bowl and maybe try to get a step ahead of it? But right now I feel like with the 50-50-ish type of game we have in the AFC, combined with the fact that I would give the AFC team a reasonable chance even against the Niners, has me kind of cool on anything. Where are you at?
So I think the process for this market needs to be like the Super Bowl, the outright prices now are pretty easy for books to calculate. And they're not gospel necessarily, but they're fairly solid. And so you take that, the win probability of the Super Bowl, and then you just divide the equity on each team by key players, and then you multiply their equity by the Super Bowl win price, and that's how you get. So it's just a question of is there misplaced equity in this market? I would argue that Lamar Jackson on this Baltimore team is probably the most likely player in NFL history to win Super Bowl MVP on his own team, just because there's no skill position players. I guess if Mark Andrews comes back and is fully healthy, and Andrews has the game that looked like Travis Kelce was going to have in the Super Bowl last year, maybe if just all of Lamar's passing production went to Andrews, or if Kyle Hamilton has multiple interceptions and Lamar doesn't play that well, maybe, but I think Lamar is north of 90% of Baltimore's equity you can make a similar case for Mahomes. I think with Mahomes, it's a little interesting just because the Chiefs' offense hasn't been as dominant. I do think there is more potential. 2 years, last year when they played the Eagles, I was making the same case for Mahomes as for Lamar, but that was when Mahomes was, a near unanimous MVP and in an explosive offense, and he was just going to get so much passing production. Just with how this offense has struggled, and you look at the team that they're most likely to play in the Super Bowl, is San Francisco, who has a poor run defense. Like Isaiah Pacheco is like almost 150-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. I don't know, like in the Miami-Kansas City game, like would Rashid Rice not have won MVP? Like he was 8 for 130 and a touchdown, and Mahomes was 262 and a touchdown. Rashid Rice is 120-1. So I think those would be the two guys on Kansas City that I would look at. But I think the most interesting conversation by far in this market is Brock Purdy, who the market is saying that he is like 55% of San Francisco's MVP equity. Like, I'm sorry, it's just too low. Like, it's too low. The guy would have won MVP if he had won one game as a 6.5-point favorite against Baltimore. And I think that for all the thought of, Purdy has a stench on him now in his last two big games, he hasn't showed up. One, that will all get washed away if he plays well in a Super Bowl, because people aren't as worried about what your reputation is. Like, it's just whoever the best player in the given game is. What was the guy we were talking about yesterday? Malcolm Smith from Seattle, who won Super Bowl MVP. Like, I don't think anyone was worried that like Malcolm Smith missed a tackle in week 14 or whatever, and he can't win Super Bowl MVP. Like, it's purely isolated to that game. And then the other thing I think that's key with Purdy is that if he gets to the Super Bowl, he's 100% to play either Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. And it's pretty difficult to conceive of the Niners winning the Super Bowl without Brock Purdy playing well.
Yeah.
And so I think that Purdy is north of 70% of San Francisco's equity. I think that he is the best bet in the market among the favorites. He would be my bet. And then further down, if I was going to take a couple flyers, it would probably be Rice and Pacheco. But what do you think?
I agree with all that. I think there is definitely, if you want to construct the black swan type of outcome here, is there a game where it's just not especially competitive and Baltimore wins pretty easily against either the Lions or the Niners? Absolutely. And in that game state, is there a Malcolm Smith? Sure. And could it be Kyle Hamilton? Yeah, but you're now counting on him getting interceptions. Could it be Roquan Smith just because he deserves consideration? Could it be Justin Matabuke, who all of a sudden is kind of one of the more dynamic pass rushers that we have going? There are too many candidates for me to single a guy there, but I agree with your points that if the Ravens win, and if it's because of the Ravens offense, or at least even kind of an equal contribution of Ravens offense and defense, like it has been for most of the season, then Lamar Jackson probably waltzes. But got to get there first.
Yes, he does, which is not going to be easy. But the thing with defensive players are often like, oh, look, Kyle Hamilton's, he's 400-1, which is pretty big.
That's a big number.
The thing is that, like, okay, how does Kyle Hamilton win MVP? Here's what he needs. He needs minimum 2 interceptions. If he has 1 interception, unless it's like a 99-yard touchdown return, and then Lamar also plays really poorly, like, he probably needs 2 interceptions, Lamar Jackson to play poorly, and they need to win the game still. Like, it takes a ton. Like, how many sacks does Nick Bosa need to win Super Bowl MVP? Like, probably so 3 minimum. Yeah. Probably needs 3 sacks, or he needs 2.5, and a strip sack fumble, and Purdy to play poorly, and McCaffrey to play poorly. Like, it's just, I think that people have really internalized Von Miller's Super Bowl MVP and not kind of reflected enough on the fact that, like, the Broncos had literally the worst quarterback in the NFL playing for them at that point, who just wasn't going to win. And just the way the game unfolded, it was going to go to a player on the defense. And so, look, there's absolutely a chance a defensive player could win, but it's not like it's not very predictable. It's an extremely low percentage chance. I think often the defense, particularly now in this era where there's just so much stat accumulation through the air, it's going to gravitate towards quarterback.
Sure.
And I don't really see, I mean, the Lions, who we haven't mentioned yet, because, they are 8-1 to win the Super Bowl. I have no interest in Goff. The market is saying that he's like 95% of, or 95% of Detroit's equity. Like I don't have any interest in that. There's no Lion to me who's super appealing. I mean, you could say, we spoke about this when we were at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago about how I actually thought Cooper Kupp was more likely to win Super Bowl MVP than Matthew Stafford. And that ended up being, I'm not sure it's the correct take, because I think Odell Beckham was probably going to win Super Bowl MVP before he tore his ACL. But in terms of a Cuppian receiver, the guy is probably Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just has an overwhelming amount of targets, and he's 80-1. Like, is he 10% to win Super Bowl MVP if the Lions win? Maybe. I could maybe get behind that. If you can shop around, if there's anything 100-1 or better, I think that's probably pretty good.
Yeah, no, that was all fair. I guess the one wrinkle we haven't covered, have we heard if the Sodfather is going to be involved at all? Because it is a natural grass field in Vegas. They roll in the Bermuda. So if it's a little slick, if it's a little dewy, you can toss Nick Bosa, you could toss all the pass rushers, and really it turns into just whichever quarterback has the ball last type of game, which obviously narrows down the field.
Yep, it's it's a really fun market to live bet, because it's very difficult to trade these markets live, and there are a number of books who do it live, and it's probably the most exploitable live market you'll find in the Super Bowl, particularly if the quarterback throws an early interception, which just makes it chaos across the board. But and that's what makes it the most fun. But I think it's Lamar, Purdy, Mahomes. Then I think it's a significant drop off to everyone else. And the way to think about this market is like, all right, create the situation, create the scenario where George Kittle wins Super Bowl MVP. Like, what actually needs to happen? And is that price bigger than what his same game parlay price is going to be of having 120 plus yards, 2 touchdowns, and the Niners money line? And often the just betting the props around the player for a non-quarterback is a better option than actually betting their Super Bowl MVP price. But yeah, Brock Purdy, let's go. Let's do it again. Let's actually win this MVP this time, Brock. Be great. All right. It's another Big Ten basketball doubleheader on Tuesday night. Drew, Nebraska tips things off at 6:30 p.m. Eastern when they host Ohio State. Then second-ranked Purdue takes on Michigan in the nightcap at 9 p.m. Check out both matchups exclusively on Peacock. All right, a couple novelty-type markets that are out there. The next team odds for Bill Belichick and Jim Harbaugh. Belichick, and we're recording late Monday afternoon, so if anything changes, we won't know about it. But the Falcons are minus 400 for Belichick. Any other teams, 5-1. Retirement is 9-1. Do you think that this is pretty done, him going to Atlanta?
Certainly seems like that. I haven't gotten any early mail on this, but I agree with the market sentiment that this is likely. Certainly, Blank and Belichick have just a ton of common ground. His relationship with Rick McKay, who obviously has a lot more, I think, to do with the decision making in Atlanta than people realize. Him having an existing relationship with Belichick kind of softens the blow of giving up some of the football control. So, it does seem like a good fit, hand in glove, in terms of kind of the way that organization is structured. And, in general, like Belichick finding his way into the modern day AFC East. The entire AFC East Belichick dominance was in large part based on the rest of the teams just not having an answer at quarterback and being a little bit mismanaged in the way that they were rostered. And, landing in the NFC South has a pretty decent parallel to that. And, my operating assumption is Belichick wants 2 or 3 more years to try to pass Shula in terms of the all-time coaching wins record. And, he's got enough of a foundation there and enough of a commitment from the ownership in terms of, spending money on a roster that I think he could probably achieve it. So, Atlanta does make the most sense for me for Belichick. The big question just becomes, what do they do at quarterback then? And, what is his vision for trying to win football in the NFC?
Yep. Who'd you price as the favorite to be the week 1 starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons? Your options are, well, there's the incumbents in Ritter and Heineke, I guess. There's Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yes, that is probably the one. I think the reunion of Jimmy G and Belichick in Atlanta does feel, I don't know about likely, but definitely in the cards, especially if, McDaniels ends up back on the staff as the offensive coordinator there. We know he has affinity for, coaching Jimmy G. So, yeah, there's definitely some parallels there. I doubt that they're in the quarterback draft and develop market. I think I've seen enough that that's not going to go well, with the end of Belichick's tenure in New England. So realistically, you're bringing in a bona fide, maybe it's Kirk Cousins. That's not a crazy shot. But it's going to be someone who can, run an efficient offense, who's got the reps. And honestly, I'm not like excited about Jimmy G in Atlanta. I'm not like, ooh, I want to go bet Atlanta, because that type of a move doesn't really move the needle for me because he's made of glass. But I do think a lot of his performance issues last year were born out of injury. And, who's to say if you can't get a healthy year out of him, if you can't win 11 games there.
Yeah, I think if they did get Jimmy G, I think they'd be pretty clearly the favorite to win the NFC South, just kind of by default and by the rest of the competition, but being pretty uninspiring. It's going to be funny at the press conference when he gets introduced and he gets to talk about how he's excited to work with Desmond Ridder, given he'll still be on the roster, but just tricking. It's not going to be Desmond Ridder as the quarterback. It'll be someone else. We do know who the quarterback will be for Jim Harbaugh's likely next team. The Chargers are minus 300 to be that team. Not a head coach of an NFL team is plus 175. Do you think that this is similarly done?
This one I feel less certain about, because the Chargers have canvassed such a broad palette of potential candidates here, and the fact that they led with the kind of head coach as opposed to leading with the general manager, like, I always find it a little backwards when organizations do that. Like, you're going to hire the coach first and then decide who that person reports to potentially. Like, you want to bring those two people in lockstep with this shared vision, and in general, and if you hire a general manager, you want to make sure that that person has the same sort of vision as the coach in terms of how to how to compete and win. So a little weird doing it this way. I would say that they put the cart, I think, before the horse, in part because if you do go with the Harbaugh, he's his particular relationship with general manager would be different on an org chart than a lot of the candidates that they're interviewing who would be elevated from coordinator, for instance. So I would expect that we may not get news on this for a little bit here, as they kind of work out who the general manager would be, if that person would work with Harbaugh, if that person would prefer one of the other candidates that they would bring in for a second interview. So I don't get the sense that their decision making is as close as the Falcons, really. I think the fact that they're taking their time and they're trying to do their due diligence is noteworthy. It's the best job open, in my opinion, because of Justin Herbert. And I think ultimately, it would be a good fit for Jim Harbaugh. I just don't have a strong sense of that moves the needle from them being sort of an also-ran in the AFC to a true equal contender with the likes of the Chiefs. Although Harbaugh was certainly he was successful at the NFL level, successful at the college ranks, so not a ton to doubt him in terms of his ability to kind of get that team to play better football. So I think it would be a perfectly fine decision. I just don't get the sense that it's imminent.
Yeah, they're a strange team to think about, like the variability with that team, because I think Justin Herbert is probably the 5th or 6th best quarterback in football. If you're saying that there's a big four of Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, and Burrow in some order, and then I would say that it's like Herbert, Stroud, honestly, at this point, like they might be the next two. And that's why this is the most attractive job in terms of winning in the immediate, at least. But I don't know, what's the Chargers win total going to be going into next season? It's going to be 8.5, 9, that type of range. Like, I don't think that They're going to come in as they'll probably be the second favorite in the division because they're always the second favorite in the division. But obviously they have immense ceiling if they can get more competence around Justin Herbert. All right. Anything else on the Chargers?
No. But there were a couple coaching nuggets today that I think we should give a little bit of consideration to. What do they mean? Nice little round of applause to the Jacksonville Jaguars for going and getting Ryan Nielsen as the new defensive coordinator. Thought that was a nice move. He certainly has, shown enough of a track record to believe with the pieces you have in place on that defensive roster, that you'll see improvement next year. And then similarly, the Bears going out and getting Shane Waldron. Ooh.
Yep.
Ooh, didn't see that coming, and they were pretty aggressive on that front. And I think that's a pretty clear upgrade over Luke Getsy. Do you get a sense of whether that means more likely drafting Caleb Williams or sticking and working with Justin Fields?
I believe it indicates a likelihood of drafting Caleb Williams. I think they have some history together, Waldron and Williams, like working at the same camp or something. I don't know. I think there is something that ties those two guys together. And so, I mean, he is, I guess, the quarterback whisperer in a way with what he did with Geno. So, yeah, I just think everything points to drafting a quarterback one, and that quarterback is likely Caleb Williams. So from everything the market is it's like minus 600 Caleb to go one now, that type of range. Everything I've heard is that it is not done, that it's Williams, and that May is still in play, though. I think Waldron might imply more likelihood of Caleb. Have you heard anything on the number one overall pick?
No, and that's kind of why I wanted to ask you, because I hadn't heard that there was any kind of legacy connection between Waldron and Williams. This guy's Waldron is a tricky case because he kind of succeeded in the face of not really having much in the way of not much to work with when he got there and turned Geno Smith into comeback player of the year. And I've always admired what they were doing conceptually in Seattle, and I think he suffered a little bit from Pete Carroll kind of forcing the issue. So interested to see what he has with a little bit more latitude.
Yep. So Caleb Williams is working with the QB Collective for training, and that's Shane Waldron's attached to that. So that's actually not that much of a connection, but a little thing. It looks like Justin Fields is also there, though. So probably nothing. So right now, Caleb Williams is minus 700, and Drake May's plus 450. I don't know. From what I've heard, that should be more bunched together, and that is not a done deal. We've seen how violently this market moves. Trayvon Walker coming from the clouds. CJ Stroud was your favorite to go number one at a point last season, so it can move a fair bit. Just last thing,
neither of those is the example I would have gone with, but that's fine.
Yeah. Trayvon was one of the
Trayvon was big, 33-1. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Bryce Young was a dog for a while. Everyone was like, it's going to be CJ Stroud, and then it wasn't, and it probably should have been. Last thing on head coaches, is there any particular vacancy that you would like to fill in your mind? Anyone who's particularly viable for a certain spot?
No, I'll be honest with you. The entire cycle so far has felt like there's a lot of jobs that are real iffy, and there's a lot of candidates who I have sincere questions about. And I know that he currently has is in a job, in a role, but I think the Buffalo Bills need to reset. And I think Sean McDermott could find a home somewhere else in the NFL and be perfectly happy. And that would be a win-win divorce. And we need to get Josh Allen under some new tutelage. Yeah.
To me, I think Josh Allen just needs a wide receiver one, and Stephon Diggs doesn't seem to be that anymore. I thought actually McDermott, who I thought was comically bad for stretches in the first 12 games of the season, I think the way that he got that kind of patchwork defense to play up until they just lost too many guys against the Chiefs, they were way more aggressive on fourth down as well. They went for it, and they were on 40 in the first quarter against the Chiefs. I thought that McDermott I think he probably did save himself with that late surge, but agreed. It's not like he's a super high ceiling. You imagine like Ben Johnson with that offense with Josh Allen to play with, like it would be. It would be.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I guess here's kind of like the closing thought on that, because I don't want to pretend like McDermott. I agree with you. Like what he did for the defense this year, in particular, getting them to perform as well as they did down the stretch, really, really, really impressive. The fact that you can develop young talent like that, or you can develop guys who are on the street and develop into playable, above replacement level production is really cool and impressive. His game management stuff was never right. The fact that now you're gonna go like here's the problem: you stick with McDermott, he is like the lamest of lame ducks next year. I guess there's a bunch of them actually. Tomlin and McCarthy. You got a handful of guys who are going to be, who are in an unenviable situation. McDermott's at the top of the list, though. He already fired his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator. Like he's kind of running out of anyone to throw in front of the train here. And on top of that, like an entire offseason narrative of the window is closed. It has closed now instead of like, is it closing? Like I don't think that fosters a healthy environment for everybody else on your team, and I don't think you can or want to waste another year of Josh Allen in his prime. So I think it's a mutual win-win if he moves on to another squad and they get an offensive minded guy in there like Ben Johnson. Man, what a fit that would be.
That would certainly be the most fun from an NFL fever dream perspective.
Surely.
To not have the cape weigh so heavily on Josh. All right, before we get to NBA Coach of the Year, Ohio State, Drew, is looking to keep pace with the front runners in the Big Ten women's basketball standings, and they'll have a chance to do so on Thursday when they face Illinois. Watch the Buckeyes and the Fighting Illini showdown at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. All right, NBA Coach of the Year before we wrap up. So I'll give you my breakdown of how I approach this market. I think there's a number of questions to answer. So the way I look at this is, one, I think that if Mark Daigneault or Chris Finch, if they get the 1 seed in the West, I think that is your very likely Coach of the Year. So that's kind of starting point one. Starting point two is asking what happens if Denver gets the 1 seed in the West, because I think that's kind of your chaos scenario for Coach of the Year. And then three, which is the third point in which I kind of examine this market, is how likely is Ty Lue to win Coach of the Year if the Clippers get the 1 seed? I think that if you can capably answer those questions and assign probabilities, then you've priced the market pretty well. But let's start with Ty Lue, who's 18-1. Daigneault's the favorite, plus 120. Chris Finch is plus 240. Rick Carlisle is 8-1, which I don't agree with at all. I think it should be a lot longer. But what do you think of Ty Lue at 18-1? Because the Clippers are in the market like plus 650 to get the 1 seed, which is obviously a lot shorter than 18-1. Do you think that Lue, what kind of chance do you think that he has to win if he got the 1 seed?
Well, I personally make the Clippers probability of getting the 1 seed a lot more likely than that. This team is absolutely coming. They are the kind of number one power rated team right now by my numbers, even ahead of Boston, which maybe sounds sacrilegious, but I think Boston, with this rotating cast of characters on the injury report on any given night, you have to kind of downgrade them a little bit from just continuity standpoint. The Clippers are, my number said I have them actually closer to 21% to get the 1 seed right now. And this is not docking the Timberwolves or the Thunder. And it is counting on, to a degree, the Nuggets playing with their food a little bit, as they have been all season for the duration here. So 5-1 seems realistic to me. The Clippers getting the 1 seed in a crowded West makes him an absolute candidate. No questions asked. People were, very, very skeptical of him as a long-term answer coach, which I never understood when the Clippers were struggling last year and then into this season and trying to integrate these players. But he's done an incredible job. I like him as a head coach a lot. And I think ultimately, Yeah, the Clippers being sort of a bet on in all these markets is smart because they are going to finish this season hot. And there's something to be said about a team like the Thunder and the Timberwolves who have now anchored themselves at this point in the season as likely 1-seed teams. And if they don't get it, then that's a reason not to give their coach of the year.
Yep. I think Daigneault's price is way too short because I don't think he's winning this award without the 1 seed unless there's a little bit of chaos around it, because right now we think of this team as overachieving like significantly. But once we get to the end of the season, and it's been another few months of this, and Chet is an advanced stat darling, and Shea is going to be top 2 or 3 in MVP. People are it's kind of like what happened it's a different version of what happened to JB Bickerstaff 2 years ago when the Cavs win total was like 26.5 and they were on pace for like 50 wins for a time. It's like, hold on, how is this award not just done? But you just get acclimated to what the team's play is, and then you forget how bad they were supposed to be. And it's not like the Thunder was supposed to be bad, but they were supposed to be a low 40s team. And so I think if Daigneault, if he cools off a bit and ends up at 53 wins and a 2 seed, like that could win, but I don't think it's likely to. And certainly don't think it's odds on to. I think he needs the 1 seed. I think Finch needs the 1 seed as well. And I think that Finch at plus 240 is actually slightly good in terms of value because they're shorter than plus 240 to get the 1 seed. They have an incredibly easy schedule. They have no MVP candidate taking credit away from him like Daigneault has with Shea. So I think that is one bet. I think Lou is the best bet on the board, though, at 18-1. I think you should be closer to half that price because there's a strange thing with this where I think the fact that like everyone hated the Harden trade for the Clippers, and it was kind of laughed at and scoffed at. Yeah. That, oh, look, they're going around the bend with James Harden again. This is going to be a disaster. Everyone gets hurt, and there's only one basketball for all these guys. And the fact that they are this good, and the fact that if they got the 1 seed, I think that a lot of people who hated that trade to rationalize it to themselves, like you have to give a lot of credit to Ty Lue. And so I think that if he is the 1 seed, I think that he would be a significant chance to win. So he'd be my bet. Anyone else who's interesting on the board?
No, but I think Joe Mazzulla is doing a nice job of screening all of the Eastern Conference candidates out of consideration, which is why this is a fun award to handicap, because you're really looking at like 3 guys in the West, and one of those guys is 18-1. So yeah, let's go. But yeah, no, the point you've made is very fair. Like at this point, if the Oklahoma City Thunder finish, with just a little bit over 500 basketball, which is again what they were expected to be this season, and they have 49 wins, that's going to feel like a disappointment, and it's going to hurt Daigneault's case. So it's almost like they need to continue on this torrid pace or even improve off of this pace, which I can't see it happening. They are young. They do have fresh legs. They do have a little bit more resistance to injury, to fatigue, things like that. So we're a long way from kind of putting any kind of a line through the Thunder being your top seed in the West. But again, like if the Timberwolves are not the 1 seed, if the Thunder are not the 1 seed, that right there is 2 reasons not to give their coach of the year.
Yeah, and I think I still have Daigneault the favorite in the market just because I think there's very, very little scope for Finch to win without the 1 seed. I think there is more scope for Daigneault to do it just because the team is so young and it's such a great story. And if they're the 2 seed and Denver are your 1 seed, then I think there are certainly worlds where he can win in that scenario, even if it's not, close to odds on. But I would have Daigneault and Finch. They're your clear top tier. And I would have Daigneault slightly in front of Finch. And then I would have Ty Lue as the 3rd favorite in this market. And right now he's like 7th. And then after that, I think there is a massive drop-off. I just don't think Joe Mazzulla is going to win. I think they're going to have to win like 66 games and then also have Denver be the 1 seed on the other side. And I just don't think, I just don't think that you're getting the price for Mazzulla there. Carlisle, I just don't understand why he would be that short. Like they're likely going to be a 6 seed. Like what does Rick Carlisle need to do? Like he probably needs to get a 2 seed or a 3 seed and be the story of the second half of the season. Jamal Mosley at 16-1, I think I would probably have him the 4th favorite just because now that Orlando's healthy, like they could go on a run. And, if the Magic got a 4 seed, that's a pretty incredible story. Again, I still think Mosley with a 4 seed would lose to Daigneault or Finch with a 1 seed. So that's tough for him. Nick Nurse needs a 1 seed. Udoka needs to get to like a 4 or 5 seed to win. So yeah, I think there's a pretty steep drop off after your top 3.
Yep. We're on exactly the same page. And the Rick Carlisle. I mean, Jade, did you forget he was the runner-up of the in-season tournament?
It's true. Not hearing much love for Darvin Ham, Coach of the Year, who was the winner.
No, I mean, honestly, the Pacers story is the emergence of Tyrese Haliburton.
Yes.
If he keeps them together through this absence, then tip to Rick Carlisle. But yeah, that the Pacers likely landing as a 6 or 7 seed, I think, is realistic.
Yep. No, we agree there. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you tomorrow.